Okay, we are now live. And we're about a minute early, so I'll just give a couple people some time to sign on. I just heard a...
I don't know where that came from.
I don't know either. Okay, it's 7:30, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Amanda Kreider, and I'm the Artistic Director of IlluminArts. We're a concert series here in Miami, Florida, and we present art song and vocal chamber music, mostly in curated concerts in museums and galleries around the city. And I'm thrilled to have our panelists here tonight for this Glory of This Perfect Day, programming and planning recitals of art song by Black composers. And before we get started, I'm going to introduce soprano Catherine Mueller, who will be introducing our panelists. Kat is an incredible soprano, and actually the impetus for this panel is she recently gave a benefit recital for IlluminArts with music of Black composers, including one of our panelists, Recitals Powell. And we decided we wanted to have a conversation because we want people to have a better way to access music of Black composers. And we have an incredible panel here of performers, producers, educators, and I think we're all going to learn a lot tonight. So without further ado, Kat, welcome.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm so excited that this panel came together with such a fantastic group of people and musicians here to talk. And so I just want to quickly introduce everyone so that everyone watching knows who you're meeting tonight. And then I'll hand it off to Amanda to lead the discussion tonight. So in alphabetical order, Reggie Mobley is an acclaimed countertenor who has sung across the United States and Europe, including with Musica Angelica, Philharmonia Baroque Orchestra, Opera Lafayette, Washington Bach Consort, Seraphic Fire, Pacific Music Works, and Bach Collegium San Diego. He has gotten several Grammy nominations, most recently just in this last round for his work on A Lad's Love with Brian Giebler. And he's also been featured on several albums with the Monteverdi Choir, with Sir John Eliot Gardiner conducting, including a recording of Bach's St. Matthew Passion and Magnificat. He has also recorded Peace in Our Time, an album with Agave Baroque, and he's looking forward to the release of another album with them called American Originals, which celebrates the music of composers of color. And in March 2020, Reggie became the first ever programming consultant for the Handel and Haydn Society in Boston, following several years of leading Handel and Haydn in his community, engaging Every Voice concerts. So thank you for joining us, Reggie. And then Kenneth Overton is a baritone who was raised in Philadelphia. His singing career has taken him around the globe to sing with some of the most prestigious opera companies and orchestral organizations in the world, including the New York Philharmonic, San Francisco Opera, Utah Festival Opera and Musical Theater, Opera Memphis, and Opera Carolina. His roles include Germont in La Traviata, Papageno in Die Zauberflöte, Sharpless in Madama Butterfly, Leporello in Don Giovanni, Lawyer Fraser in Porgy and Bess, and Marcello and Schaunard in La Bohème. He is familiar to IlluminArts audiences because he's performed 2 times for IlluminArts. And he released his debut solo album, Been in the Storm So Long, Song My Fathers Taught Me, which is a homage to the spiritual tradition that has been formative in his artistic life. So thanks for joining us, Kenny. And then Recitals Powell is a composer and also a professor of voice at Auburn University. She's one of America's premier women composers of choral music, especially. She's published by some of the nation's leading publishers, including Hal Leonard, Oxford University Press, and Shawnee. Dr. Powell is frequently commissioned to compose for university choruses, professional, community, and church choirs, and high school choirs. And her works have been conducted and premiered by renowned conductors, including Anton Armstrong, Philip Brunel, Bob Chilcott, and Andre Thomas. She serves as professor of voice at Auburn University. Her degrees include a doctorate from Florida State University, master's from Westminster Choir College, and an undergraduate degree from Alabama State University. She served on the faculties of Philander Smith College and Georgia Southern University before coming to Auburn University, where she has taught since 2001. Oh, thank you, Persephone, and welcome. And Cunha Rowley is the founder and artistic director of Hued Songs. He is a South Florida native and is a community, social impact, and artistic leader in Miami. He is the founder and artistic director of Hued Songs, which is a not-for-profit collective that celebrates Black culture through artistic experiences. He's also the Music Access, Arts, and Culture Manager at the Miami Foundation, where he leads the foundation's effort focused on making music education and the arts more accessible and equitable in the city. He is a graduate of the University of Florida and an alum of the New World School of the Arts opera program. He has worked with Magic City Opera, Slow Burn Theater, Opera Naples, Florida Grand Opera, Orchestra Miami, Klezmer Orchestra, and M Ensemble. Cunha is also the 2017 recipient of the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation's Knight Arts Challenge Grant, which propelled him to the founding of Hued Songs. And he serves on the review panel for the National Young Arts Foundation's Classical Voice Division. So welcome, Cunha. And Louise Toppin is a soprano and also professor of voice at the University of Michigan. She's a performer, scholar, and professor who specializes in the concert repertoire of African-American composers. In the span of her career, more than 30 songs and 2 operas have been written expressly for her voice. And she is the administrator of the George Shirley Vocal Competition, which she has been leading for the past 9 years, as well as Videmus, which is a nonprofit organization that promotes the concert repertoire of African-American and women composers. And she has encouraged the performance and scholarship of African-American compositions by students and scholars through her many recordings, conference presentations, live performances, and lectures. As a singer, she has sung operatic, orchestral, and oratorio performances throughout the United States and the world. She previously was Distinguished Professor and Chair of the Department of Music at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And before that, she taught at East Carolina University, Bowling Green State University, and Eastern Michigan University. And currently she is a professor of voice at the University of Michigan. So Louise, so glad that you're here with us tonight too. And I will pass it back to Amanda Kreider, who will be moderating. As she introduced herself at the beginning, Amanda is the artistic director of IlluminArts. She's also an incredible mezzo-soprano who has sung with opera companies around the US, including LA Opera, Boston Lyric Opera, Dallas Opera, New York City Opera, and Florida Grand Opera. And she has appeared as a recital soloist numerous times with the Joy in Singing Foundation in New York, and has also appeared as a concert soloist with ensembles including Calgary Philharmonic, Charlotte Symphony Orchestra, the New World Symphony, Apollo's Fire, and Seraphic Fire. She is passionate about classical music and the evolution of how to present it in a way that corresponds with the changing expectations of a 21st century audience. So Amanda, take it away.
Thank you so much, Kat, for that incredible introduction. And I'm going to remove you from the screen just so we have a little bit of a better layout. Thank you, that was wonderful. Okay, so let's jump right in. I'm so grateful that you've all chosen to share your time, knowledge, and expertise with us tonight. And I will start with Louise, a question for you. And anyone can jump in, but I'm going to just have someone to start off. My question is how to research and find music of Black composers. What are some resources?
Thank you so much for having us all here and being a part of the panel and asking that important question, because learning this repertoire does start with research. There are several anthologies that are published. Classical Vocal Reprints has the new one that I did on Margaret Bonds, and I did one on Adolphus Hailstork, but it also has Willis Patterson's first anthology from 1977. And there are other anthologies that are one place to start. Researching by listening. There's so many wonderful performances nowadays on YouTube. I used to say you have to go find a recording, but you can just go to YouTube and hear the greatest folk from the older generation to the youngest generation now singing so well, full recitals on YouTube. So that's one way. And one of the things I do with my African American art song class, I immerse them in listening. One other thing, or two other things real quickly, are look in archives. A lot of African American composers' works have ended up in archives across this country. And so if you do a search in some of the archives, you can discover some incredible gems that haven't been published yet. Talk to composers at universities who can give you leads to other composers. And lastly, look for training opportunities. And now there are podcasts. Kenneth has just done a fabulous series all year, talking to so many people. Daryl Taylor of the Art Song Alliance. These things exist so that you can learn from different people. Lastly, like at Michigan, we are starting an institute called Singing Down the Barriers, which is intended this summer for people to come for 5 days and learn the styles and the traditions of African American art song. So there are lots of ways, and I'll turn it over to my colleague.
Wow, those were incredible resources. Would anyone else like to weigh in on
well, Louise, you're so modest. You have to tell them about your incredible website that you created with all of that information. I'll let you talk about it because you can do it better than
Thank you. I just realized when you said that. So I did create a research tool for this very reason called the African Diaspora Music Project. And it has more than 4,000, I think, up to date, art songs of African American composers. And it's searchable in multiple ways. We are in the process this week of expanding it to include more than 1,000 orchestral pieces, and we're getting ready to add instrumental piano. So it's going to be a comprehensive site, and it's free. You just go online, and I wanted it to be a free research tool. If you don't know nothing about African American music, you can just start typing something like your voice. And when you type mezzo soprano, it populates all the pieces we have in the database on mezzo sopranos. And I try to get the most current things. I have Dr. Powell's set already, and I told her hot off the press, send the next thing, so that we keep up to date on what's new. Thank you, Kelly.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
So the answer to the question was Louise Toppin. That's kind of ultimately it.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Oh, good. And we have someone putting it in the chat now, the website that Louise was just speaking about. That's wonderful. I'm going to jump on to the next question, and I'll start with Kunya, but we can go around the room for this. Who are some of your favorite unknown or underperformed African-American composers?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it was interesting because I think when I was thinking about this question, I thought about the context, because I thought a lot about like unknown to whom, which, and so certainly like I could name composers that I really I love, and I'm like, I don't know if they're unknown or underperformed, but I really value Sidney Guillaume, who is Miami native, and what I love about him is that he infuses his Haitian culture into the music that he writes, and I think that that's especially important when we think about, especially in Miami, because the Black diaspora in Miami is so vast and varied. Because yes, Black American, but Haitian American, Caribbean American, and so I think the more that we can highlight and uplift composers who are really infusing like their heritage and their culture into their music, I think the better.
That's great. Reggie?
African American composers, since I'm an early musician, my life is far, far, far before now. And as far as American composers, Justin Holland is an incredible composer. He was a guitarist. He was an activist. He knew Frederick Douglass. He helped with the Underground Railroad. And he was an incredible virtuoso guitarist. He lived in Boston. He lived in Mexico. And so many of his songs kind of capture kind of the the way music kind of worked at that time. He did many transcriptions of operas for guitar, and he was incredible. But more than Justin Holland, more than just African American composers, like, as far as Black composers, Ignatius Sancho is kind of I'm championing him as much as I possibly can. He's one of the earliest Black composers we know. He was born on a slave ship. After his family was taken in West Africa, his mother died in childbirth, and his father killed himself rather than live as a slave. He was brought back to England, where he served these three sisters, and basically ran away because to work with the Duke of Montagu, who had just kind of fell in love with his intelligence and brilliance. And then Sancho basically earned his freedom that way. And when the Duke of Montagu died, he worked for his wife. And when she passed, she left him a sizable amount of money, which he used to open a grocery store in Westminster in London. And because he was a store owner, he became the first Black person, a person of African descent, to vote in parliamentary elections in the UK. He also had the first obituary published in the UK, and his letters were collected throughout his life. He was part of the literati at that time, so he knew Lawrence Stern, he knew David Garrick, and so many other great actors and theater and writers and composers. And when he died, all of his letters were collected, because what you had was a firsthand account of what it was like to live as a slave. And this was used as the backbone for the abolitionist effort in the UK. And 7 years after he died in 1780, Chevalier Saint-Georges, Joseph Foulon, actually happened to travel to London as a fencer, as opposed to a musician. But it's likely that he got a hold of his letters, and that helped him, because, of course, Joseph Foulon, even though he was a part of the French court, Chevalier Saint-Georges, and knew and played with Marie Antoinette and was a huge rival of Mozart's, he also fought in the French Revolution and fought for abolition and freeing of slaves and abolishing Code Noir in France as well. So Sancho is just kind of, he's the guy for me.
Wow, that's awesome, Reggie. I can tell you've done a lot of research on him. Rosephine.
Well, the first that come to my mind are the songs of William Grant Still. I researched him in my master's and doctoral degrees, and he too fuses his African American culture and experiences, both jazz and the spiritual, within his art songs. And I think one of a fabulously composed work is Songs of Separation, and that work, I think, impacted me as a song composer. I also like Julia Perry, Undine Smith Moore, Florence Price. I love the works of Adolphus Hailstork, David Nathaniel Baker, and these were all composers that I studied. And so I think they're all just fabulous composers in that they compose in the European style, but generally infuse African American idioms within that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Louise.
There are so many, but along with my colleagues, I think that exploring those in the diaspora has been an important thing, an interesting thing for me, as well as Sancho. I love looking at some of the African composers, and one of my favorites is Joshua Uzwogi, who is doing the same thing for African music as Burley did for spirituals, and in the sense of writing down African folk melodies that are now available for us to sing. In addition to him, I would say people like Margaret Bonds inspired me, and looking at the lineage of women from Chicago, Bonds, Price, Regina Bayaki, Betty Jackson King, Dolores White. It's been such a long, and I think that's an interesting thread, seeing all of those women from that part of the world, but there are lots and lots of them. I forgot to say conferences are another place to go for research.
Okay, wonderful.
When he was speaking, I was like, oh, that's like a conference presentation. Conferences.
That's wonderful. We just had a comment in the chat. Can someone spell all these names for us ignoramuses? And so maybe my assistant can put a list together in the chat, or we will put them together and have a resource list, because this is incredible. And Kenny, last but not least.
Yeah, and so like Reggie, mine is all the way on the flip side in that I'm so excited about celebrating the composers of now and of the future so that they are never to become unknown or lesser known, because they will be sung by me and other artists of today. Because I think that's the secret. The secret is that singers and instrumentalists with platforms have to program this music. If you don't program it, then audiences aren't going to know what it is, and then it's not going to get programmed. And so this most recent project that I've gotten a chance to record and film, it has 25 different songs by African American composers. And it was important to me to use both men and women, living and deceased, and old and new. And so some of the new folks that I am loving right now are my dear sister, Dr. Lori Celeste Hicks, Damian Jeter, Dave Ragland, Damian Sneed, and Sean Okpebolo. I mean, these composers right now are writing some incredible music, and I am persistent and insistent on programming something new on every recital program that I do. And they are in addition to people like William Grant Still and Leslie Adams and Adolphus Hailstork and Margaret Bonds and Florence Price, whose music I think is being performed more now than I think ever before. And people are finally realizing her brilliance several decades after her death, but she's always been brilliant. Her music has so much joy and hope in the sound. So I am a champion of all of these voices over all of the generations through and through.
That's wonderful, and actually leads right into my next question, which is about living composers. And we have Rosephanie here as a composer on our panel, but also are there other living composers that that have taken your attention or that we should mention here tonight?
Adolphus Hailstork, who will be 80 years old on Saturday. I love this man so much. I've gotten a chance to premiere his latest work for baritone and string quartet, and I'm going to record it with the Harlem Chamber Players next month. He's incredible. Incredible. Leslie Adams is another living favorite of mine as well. And then after that, in addition to the new folks that I just listed, I'm really in love with the sound of Joel Thompson. And he just wrote the new opera Snowy Day, which was commissioned by Houston Grand Opera. And I heard some selections from it, and it is outrageously gorgeous. Outrageously gorgeous. So look out for him. And
Wonderful.
Terrence Blanchard is also.
Good. Rosephanie, do you have any other living composers you'd like to mention?
Well, actually, I guess I see a question here from Catherine. I'll mention myself. And I have composed Miss Wheatley's Garden, which is a set of 3 songs based on poetry by African-American female poets. And it is named for Phyllis Wheatley, the first African-American published poet who was actually a slave when she was published. And she traveled the world as a poet. And so I named this work Miss Wheatley's Garden because all of these poets in my mind and based on my readings were influenced by Phyllis Wheatley's poetry. And so I now have another work coming out entitled Then, Here, and Now. And Miss Wheatley's Garden comes in both medium high and medium low voices. And I'm now releasing Then, Here, and Now, which are 4 songs composed on my experiences during COVID this last year, 2020. And so each song is based on is based on an experience that we've experienced recently. COVID the death of George Floyd, the riots that occurred after it, and then with those who were actually needing healing. So what I did was I took 4 spirituals, the text of 4 spirituals and aspects of the melodies and harmonies of African-American spirituals. And I actually set them in a new way as art songs because I want everybody to be able to sing them. So the first one is called Healing. And this song came to me as COVID-19 came on the scene and everybody was trying to figure out how are we going to experience healing. Around the world, people were trying to deal with this pandemic. And so in this song, Healing, I used the spiritual, there is a balm in Gilead, to be the message that, and the reason that the work is called Then, Here, and Now is because the message of these spirituals had power during during African-American slavery, then again during the civil rights movement. And now I wanted to bring them up into what we're going through now in the 21st century. So There's a Balm in Gilead is entitled Healing. And then there's a second one, Dying. And it's based on the spiritual, I Want to Die Easy When I Die, because that one came to my mind as I watched George Floyd die. And then there's Protest, which is Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho. And then there is Oppression, which is based on Go Down Moses. So none of these have the actual, all of the melodic and harmonic but parts of the spiritual. But anyone who knows the spiritual, I think, would be aware of how the connection between the spiritual and these particular songs. And one is actually dedicated to Dr. Toppin. Which one is dedicated to you, Louise?
I don't know. I haven't seen them yet.
You know what? No, when I sent it to you, it was on the top of the page. When I sent you all the score, each of your names, I dedicated one to Daryl Taylor, one to Marcia Porter, and one to a tenor, one of my former students. Then I've also completed Langston Dreams, which are 3 poems by Langston Hughes. And that particular work, which is 3 poems, are just like the others. They come in both high and low voices.
I am so happy to learn about this, Rosephanie, because I absolutely love Miss Wheatley's Garden. And I was hoping that you had other songs in the works. Catherine Mueller sang one of the songs from Miss Wheatley's Garden on her recital, and I've listened to the entire cycle. It's absolutely gorgeous. So
thank you.
Cannot wait to hear the rest. Yes, Louise.
Yeah, I just looked. It's Healing, you wrote to me. Thank you so much. I'm so honored. Thank you.
And Miss Powell, I'll send you my email so that I can purchase everything for low voice that you've got.
We'll be in touch for sure.
So this is my next question. And actually, we had a question in the chat about it. And I'll direct this to you, Rosephanie. The best way to find sheet music. As Louise mentioned, we can hear recordings of a lot of this repertoire on YouTube, and other kinds of research, but I personally have had trouble accessing sheet music. And I noticed on your website that you mentioned that it's difficult sometimes for composers to get publishers. And so I wondered the best way to find the music, and also how to make sure composers are compensated if they are living for their work.
No, I think Louise addressed that. I think if you go to her site, first of all, we have to be aware that the composers and the music exist. So I would say going to her site, going to other sites where there are Daryl Taylor's Art Song Alliance. When first you like she said, she lists them based on the voice. I say if you find something that you like, then I say go type that in on the internet. Then all the sites that have that, whether it's Sheet Music Plus or whether it's, if you type my name in, Hal Leonard and Gentry Publications, they're going to pop up immediately. Music Spoke is another place where composers are releasing their works. There are a number from Deirdre Robinson to Brittany Boykin. A number of these are releasing them such that they get the royalties, the majority of the royalties themselves. And a lot of people are actually releasing them on their own websites today too. So once you get that information from a site like Louise's site, type that name in, and then you'll see what pops up, and then that'll take you to the places where you can purchase them.
That's great. Does anyone else have any? Yes, go ahead, Louise.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that when you go to my site and you type in a song on the record, it tells you who the publisher is. So we've tried, and we're actually going to fix that and do a direct link to where it's sold. We're actually in the process of fixing that. So we're trying to make it even easier with no excuses. If you find the song on our site, you click and it goes to the publisher.
That's wonderful. We also have a comment from the wonderful Karen Slack, who says, email composers directly. It works.
Most definitely.
So
Yes.
great. I'm going to move on to another topic now. And Kenny, I'll start with you on this. I know that spirituals are a huge portion of the repertoire as well, and that a number of you champion the research and performance of spirituals. And I wanted you to speak to the importance of the inclusion in the concert repertoire.
For me, spirituals are America's music. The first fully composed, concertized music of America. And I believe that of the 3,000 melodies that we have at our disposal now, some of them can be sung by people of any color. And I think everybody needs to understand that. Anybody can express, in the morning when I rise, give me Jesus. Anybody can express, I want to cross over into Jordan, deep river. Anybody can express, Joshua fit the battle of Jericho. So just like we study and seek coaches for our German lieder and chanson and Russian literature, we need to seek out experts in spirituals to coach them properly, to know what dialect is appropriate, to know what spirituals are inappropriate for people who are not African American. And then we need to perform them. We need to perform them freely. We need to perform them often so that they are not forgotten. They were originally an oral tradition, and 3,000 of the 6,000 were lost because of that. And were it not for Dvorak teaching and bringing in people like Burley to teach them how to write them down, they would all be lost. And so now we have the responsibility to program them on our recitals, to bring them back into the church, to bring them into our choral situations and celebrate the music of America. Americans are so instinctively drawn to the dead Western European guys. And don't get me wrong, I love them. They have done me well. But we have to celebrate what is great about America. And if you can sing Copland, and if you can sing Paul Bowles and all of the other great American composers, then you can sing the music of the spiritual, because that's where they all came from. That's where these melodies came from. Dvorak wrote it very clearly in the first page of A Symphony for a New World, that you, in the music of the American Negro, you have everything that is needed for an entirely new school of music. And so we cannot lose that new school of music. And I have committed myself to not just singing spirituals on my program, but not saving them for my encores. I want them on the printed page, on the printed program, right under Margaret Bonds and Florence Price and Rachmaninoff and Mahler, because they deserve to be there. Burley deserves to be there. Hall Johnson deserves to be there. Moses Hogan deserves to be there. Miss Powell deserves to be there. And so we have to take full advantage and responsibility to do our work to celebrate this incredible, generous art form. And to know that of the melodies that we have at our disposal, none of them speak about hate or revenge. Mm-hmm. And that should tell you something, that if anybody could speak about hate and revenge and have the right to do so, it would be the enslaved. But they did not. They did not. And so we have to celebrate that music at all costs.
Yeah. Kenny, I remember when you sang here with IlluminArts, you said exactly that in your introduction to one of the songs that you sang, one of the spirituals that you sang on the Dandelion program. And I got chills again as you said it, because it's so profound, that statement. Kunya, I saw you unmuted.
I wanted to echo all of that that Kenny said, and I think that especially the part about how deeply rooted in history like spirituals are, and the importance of understanding and researching this truly like Black history is American history. When I think about, I founded Hued Songs, a lot of it was really actually because I was feeling very culturally and ancestrally lost. And the way that I felt I was able to reconnect with who I was as a Black man, as a Black like singer, was through spirituals and was through like unearthing and finding that music. But it's true that the repertoire is vast, but not every song is for everybody. And so I think that it requires being also deeply intentional for singers, for non-Black singers. And so I'm really glad that you said that, Louise, and Kenny as well.
Can I add to that just a bit?
Yes, please.
Not only is, I mean, both of you brilliant, and Kenny, like, yeah, goosebumps, seriously. Boys in blue right here. But what's important is the music of African Americans is not just American music, but it's American early music. It's our first music. This is important. When the first slave ship hit Jamestown, 1619, a year before the 30 Years' War started in Europe, we are talking about these songs were being developed and created and sung at the same time as Mozart and Haydn were walking around in Vienna and Paris, at the same time as Mendelssohn and Brahms were composing. This music has always been around. We're just now getting to a point where we're understanding that it's time for us to unwhitewash the canon and unwhitewash the way things have always been. We have always been here. We don't need to bring a chair to the table. We've always had a seat at the table. It's just someone else was in it. And we need to get them out and realize that we are part of this. Like my work working with early music and digging up all these Black composers and of African descent who've been around since the 15, 16, 1700s, is to realize that we've always had a stake in this. We've always had a voice, and that we're not just in the past 100 or 200 years kind of coming through the door and joining in the party. We've always been a part of it. So it's important for us to realize that. And in addition to that, I love the idea of not saving spirituals for encores, having them printed. Again, this is early music. They don't need to sit at the back of programs either. We're done being at the back of the bus. That ended a long time ago. We should be starting our programs with spirituals. They should be in the middle of our programs. I mean, they should be everywhere because they fit. And if you really are intentful in your programming and your recitals, you will see that whatever theme you have, there's a song that we've sung that fits right there. So it's just a matter of just doing the work, doing the research, and just being honest about everything. I think that really will help go a long way.
That's wonderful. Stephanie or Louise, would you like to weigh in on this? No?
Well, I would just add that, to just piggyback on what the guys have said, their early songs and they're American songs, but they're also the first American folk song, the first song created here as it relates to our culture. So the African, which is why Dvorak was saying what he was saying. Every other folk song came from either Eastern or Western Europe. This song was created right here. So it's our song. And I would like to say it was our song in slavery, meaning everyone who was involved in freedom in slavery. With the abolitionists, they sang the songs. On the Underground Railroad, they sang the songs. The songs were used as codes for people to make their way to freedom. So blacks and whites sang the songs. In the civil rights movement, the spiritual and gospel music were the unifying. Besides the preaching, it was the unifying element of the spirit of the civil rights movement. And so when you see the pictures and the videos of blacks and whites hand in hand marching, whether it's in Selma, or whether it's in Montgomery, or whether it's sitting at the counter, or whether it's riding the buses, they all were uniting through these songs. So from generation to generation, these songs have been there to speak, as one of the brothers said, they're genuine. And that is why these songs have been arranged in every style of music, from rock to jazz to pop, you name it. The African American art song is the only folk song that has been used in pretty much every idiom. So it's not just even our song, it's the world's song. And I think the more we as Americans embrace our song, the rest of the world will continue to embrace it. So, and I will say this, whenever I'm doing presentations in Europe or in Ireland or wherever I am, they love the songs. The issue is here. Now, this issue sometimes is with us as African Americans, because we don't understand the strength of our forefathers and foremothers who were slaves. The fact that they could come from another continent, different tribes, and learn a new language. Then take that language, combine it with their own, come up with a new dialect, take the music from both continents, then come up with a new music. We have a strength in this language, and then make that language become one that speaks different vocabularies, both mask and symbol. If we could get African Americans to embrace that the African American spiritual is not an old song that we should be ashamed of. It is the power. It's the shoulder on which we stand as African American people and as singers and composers and otherwise. So I think, and then with the white culture, there are all these dynamics. So you become afraid. Well, what can I sing? What can't I sing? I think it's just as everyone has said. If we do our homework and we research it, we understand which songs we can sing and which we cannot. And then, as they've also said, I think it may have been Kenny, can't remember if it was Kenny or Reggie, do the same homework that one would do when singing Russian or German or French or Italian. And I think what bothers me so often is that question that comes up so often. Well, can you tell me how to perform these songs? I mean, there's so many, when I see a choir or a student that says, I want to sing Russian, they will go and put in the work. They will go looking for a faculty member. They'll go to the library. But with us, it's always, well, I don't really know. I can't really find. I think that's another issue we have, is that it's never been respected enough to know you do have to do your homework. And I'll end with that.
I do want to add just a little bit with my colleagues that sure. I think that respect for this, as you just started to say, respect for this music as source material for other music has been a part of the problem, that people want to sing it as a less than. So that, as I've said on some other panels, that when we go to Nats or other competitions and people are programming, they think of, they'll put Copeland art songs in the art song category and spirituals are an other. And yet they're both set, they're folk music set in an art song format. Why are they not treated the same? When do we get to the point that spirituals are American folk music or just American art song? Because that's how they've been set. And then the other big issue for me is cultural context. People don't know the context. And so, as you said, people of all hues are not comfortable singing it because they don't know, they didn't learn in school. The cultural context is a part of the issue. I also agree with you. That doesn't mean you can't go and study it. That I don't know Russian cultural context until I go and read a book. But it's just something about the history of slavery. Okay, as we just don't talk about the history of slavery, it's more of, well, that's past. Yes, it's past, but you have to know the history in order to understand the music. Just like I need to know the French Revolution if I'm going to understand music of a certain era. It's okay if it's an uncomfortable subject, but we have somehow, as Americans, gotten stuck and not been and not appreciated the fact that it's okay to we have to go through it. And then we can all sing this gorgeous music. I tell people all the time, you sing Let Us Break Bread Together in your church service every Sunday. That's a spiritual. I mean, we've all been talking about spirituals. You know, he's got the whole world in his hand. Everybody sings that. But it's certain aspects about spirituals. People are willing to accept that, but not accept is masa gonna sell me tomorrow? Mama, is masa gonna sell me tomorrow? Why don't we accept that? That is another aspect of spirituals.
Thank you. Thank you all for weighing in on that. That was really enlightening. And yeah, it absolutely leads into the next question that I had, which is, some of you have already touched on it. What considerations can non-Black singers take when they are studying or performing music of Black and African American composers? And you all have touched on it a little, but if there's anything anyone else would like to add.
I just think of it systematically. Research, study, learn context like everything else, learn the language if you're going to deal in dialect, or make smart choices to not sing in dialect or to find other pieces. We've all touched on that, but and also if you're a non-Black singer and you're going to sing some of this music, contextualize it. When you go to perform it on a concert, have a program note, or better yet, talk from the stage why you want to sing. And it's not that you're explaining yourself, you're explaining the music that people haven't heard. Because we've said there's music that everyone should be able to sing, in my opinion. And I agree with that, but the audience needs a context because they're not accustomed to seeing everybody sing it. But and first and foremost to me is giving the music respect. If you can show respect in how you approach the music, like you do everything else, then you're well on your way and learning from experts along the way.
And I want to add a little bit. I think that's so important. And sometimes I think about also at the root and like systemically, that even going to school, I didn't have Black artistic mentors, and I didn't have a Black voice teacher. And I think that like so often part of that research is also understanding and delving into your network and finding also the right experts to connect with, and the right teachers and the right coaches to connect with. And certainly like the bigger issue is understanding and ensuring that our universities have more professors of color, that our universities are talking and teaching this material, and that like our professors are unabashedly like tackling this. But it's, yes, part of that research is also it's finding the right people, and certainly like, I mean, this call is a testament to the incredible experts who are out there and are well knowledged in this repertoire.
I think mostly because there are 2 Gators and 2 Seminoles in this room. But that's actually very important. I didn't really, get a chance to understand just how important things were until I went to Oakwood College and really got to learn from the people, from everyone there. And then of course at Florida State, learning from people like Doc. Like, it's just, you really grow when you have these people who know that you can just tap into and really learn it, who have the answers. You just have to ask them. It's just about being fearless. And if you really do feel uncomfortable with processing your own vulnerability and guilt and not singing these things, you know what? Again, then commission a Black composer to write something that you do want to sing. It's all, just keep paying it forward. Just keep doing the work. That's the only way we'll ever get anywhere near where we need to be.
Okay, great. This is in the same vein. But historically, in the distant or
Amanda.
recent, yes,
Amanda, do you mind if I add one more thing?
please do.
I would like to say that I think, especially based on what Kunya has stated, we have to get more non-Black instructors to decide that the music has value. Because you're going to have African Americans who and other students who can't connect if they don't have instructors who are willing to teach the music. And I've taught at about 3 or 4 different institutions, and all the time the faculty will say, well, the Black students will sing the spirituals. And I'm there on the faculty, and it's a rare occasion that one of them will say, hey, you're going to sing a spiritual, go and see Dr. Powell. And so you've got an expert on the faculty, but because of the lack of respect for the work, sometimes it's lack of respect that music is beneath the folk song arrangements of a Roger Quilter or Barber. But these Aaron Copland is who I'm thinking of. I'm sorry, I said Barber, but I meant Aaron Copland. They'll elevate those particular folk songs, but ours aren't worth the attention. So in order for students who are from our own culture, who are going to predominantly white institutions, if we're going to preserve it, we have to have other instructors who are not Black, who determine that it is part of the canon for them to be able to sing and teach the African American spiritual. And then the second thing is, I think we have to be careful about assuming that every time someone that's African American composes a particular piece, that it is only for African Americans. I've had people from Canada, Europe, here in America asking me, can they sing Miss Wheatley's Garden? Now, these are people, and they're saying, as a white person, can I sing Miss Wheatley's Garden? I'm writing back saying, the only thing that's Black about Miss Wheatley's Garden is that I'm a Black woman and the poets are Black. Everything else is written, for the most part, from a European stylistic advantage. And I do have jazz colors in my music. But if you read the text, again, we're talking about not, I don't even know how to say it, determining that because I'm Black, it will be appropriation for you to sing a work by me. If you bought the composition and you sit and you read that poetry, and that poetry is about love, it's about lost love, it's about writing, singing songs that bring people through difficult times. I think sometimes we have to step out of all that's going on in the world and say, what is the message? And I think that Louise said it. What's the message that poem is expressing? If it's a message that I relate to, then I can share it.
Yes, Louise, go ahead.
Can I say, she's talking about too, that broader question, which is what is taught in the education. It's sort of what Kunya was saying as well. If you don't have classes and African American art songs and professors that have trained are availing themselves of the training, it stays the same. It stays stuck with, oh, this is how I conceive of African American music. It's for this small portion of people. And I know that colleagues were teaching just spirituals to Black students. I actually teach Michigan's African American art song course. It's all students take it. They are all learning how to sing spirituals and how to make choices. And they're learning a swath. They actually sang one of your songs yesterday, by the way. They're learning a swath of repertoire from the historic composers to the dead composer, to the living composers, and learning how to decide what they gravitate toward, but also how to open their minds to relate it to what they have had in their music education. Oh, we were talking about serialism in music history. Aha, this composer goes along with that. And that's how they're approaching it and how we're talking about it. It's getting people out of that mindset. And that's a curriculum issue, is getting people to accept that they need to change the curriculum.
Yes, I do want to comment that the recital that Catherine Mueller recently sang, it was all music of Black composers, and Reggie helped us program, market the performance, and Dr. Powell just mentioned exactly what Reggie was saying, is that Kat is a white woman. She's performing all music of Black composers. She did her research. She presented it in such a beautiful way. And he said the shame would be if this music wasn't performed, if not everyone felt comfortable approaching it, researching it, performing it. So everything you've all said just echoes that completely, and I really appreciate it. I have one final question, and then I'll look at the chat and see if we have any other questions there. But it is, what areas of improvement do you see in programming or promoting performances of music by Black composers? And what is your ideal vision for how the repertoire is presented in the future?
I actually, it's funny. I see a lot of immediate action, which I hope continues. I see the immediate action because of what is happening in the country, or what has happened in the country in the last year, because we have been forced and paralyzed in our homes to sit there and watch it. And so social media has played a great part in holding people accountable immediately for right now, with, black boxes on their profiles, and this sort of immediate rush to program Florence Price's symphonic works or to perform Margaret Bonza's works right now. And it's great, because these composers, in particular, these women, deserve to have their music heard on a global stage and all the time, just like Mozart, Verdi, Puccini, Bach, and Beethoven. But it's the long run that I'm looking forward to, in hopes that this will continue, and in hopes that it will become not a hot button issue, that the Florence Price Piano Concerto No. 2 is on the same program as Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto No. 2 in the second half. It shouldn't be a big deal. It shouldn't be just done in Black History Month, because I'm tired of that. Really tired of that. So I'm hoping that arts administrators, symphonies, opera companies, everybody will get to a point where programming the music of Black composers is something that comes naturally. And it will become natural when you hire and employ people behind the scenes and in your offices that have the knowledge of programming these pieces, and how to find them, and who's played them in the past, and where they fit in your season, and what soloists you can bring in to sing them, in addition to what soloists you can bring to sing the Brahms Requiem. We have to have people on both sides of the proscenium, with the intelligence and the know-how and the sensitivity and the desire to do the work, to present these works respectfully, beautifully, and often enough so that it becomes normal. So that it becomes something that, I go to the New York Phil, and it's not a big deal that Adolphus Hailstork is on the program. It's not a big deal. And that people in the audience know his name. That the people in the audience know Margaret Bonza's name, and not who is this or who is that or why. When are we getting to the Rachmaninoff? I wanted to get to that point. And so we've got to start putting people in places with the know-how to perform this music respectfully and beautifully and often.
I second all of that. And I think, I was thinking about, as you said that, an article I read, and it said that independent opera companies will save opera. And I don't know if I agree with that, but it was interesting because it said that independent opera companies, small chamber music collectives, like they are small enough to be able to shift and program in a way that's so intentional, consistently, versus larger institutions where it's this kind of trickle down effect where, yes, it's like, okay, well, we did the Black History Month performance, we did the Black Opera check, and so I also want to highlight that I hope, and this is really from community-wide, I want us to support the small organizations that are also, and the singers that are being so intentional about doing this work. Yes, like IlluminArts. I also want to plug an organization in Miami led by Portia Dunkley, Music of the Unsung America, that is performing works by Black composers. It's commissioning works by Black composers. Because I think that there's a lot happening within our communities, but we have to be intentional also about supporting it and paying them and being patrons.
Thank you, Quinn.
I agree with my colleagues, and I wanted to add that I think that the education piece in terms of universities, it's also a time of reckoning for them as well, that they're spending a lot of time now thinking about it. So as we talk about trying to get African-American music in the standard musical canon, what better place than the educational system that is producing the next generation of entrepreneurs and performers and teachers? So I think that my hope is that, as Kenneth said, that it's not just a moment for now, but that there is intentionality. And I agree with what Kunya said as well, that supporting those who have already been doing it, because a lot of them, I've been doing this for 30 years. This is not new to me. This is something I intentionally wanted to do. But there are lots of little organizations like mine that have been doing this work, and they will continue. Regardless of what happens, those groups will be there. But I do want to begin to see the larger groups tap in, partner with those who have been doing it, because that's a very smart way, as Kenneth said, to bring on the expertise that you need. Then what better way than look to your community of all these great groups that are doing some really innovative programming. And then that large cog of universities that are they will trickle down and affect more people with some really tectonic shifts. And that's what it's going to take. But it's going to be pulling that curriculum and doing some intentional work to infuse in your orchestra, in your opera, in your choir, and not just because there's a Black director in any of those, but all of them. And then doing like our department did. Every voice teacher, we revised the curriculum. Every student sings, women composers, Black composers, living composers. We have put that down in writing, so our students have no doubt of where Michigan's stance is on African-American composers and others that we have determined that it's important. So when your students start to see that, they know how to respond and continue to push so that the curriculum begins to push. One of my students today told me that a student actually had a homework assignment from another university. I don't remember where, but I think it was somewhere in Boston. And that student said, yeah, we have to analyze a piece it was somebody like, not San George, but it was somebody like Margaret Bonds. We have to analyze a piece by them. And he said, Dr. T, that's a victory. And I said, yes, it is. That was even brought in as a thought. We need more of that across the country.
If I can add to that, my brilliant colleagues have said it's important. The curriculum is so huge, like that's extremely important. It's time to start rethinking the way we teach history classes and theory classes, to accept idioms that are known by not just Western European whites. We need to also add more than just the usual 4 composers to who we talk about and really spend time on in our history courses. In addition to that, for those listening or out there who do happen to control, direct ensembles at courses, at universities, it's also important not to always put a label on things. It's important to just program a concert of Black composers or female composers and don't look for that wokeness badge. Just do it. And let the students find out. Let the program notes, clue the audience in on these things. We can normalize this now. We can do the work now, and it will spread. And one more thing I'd like to add is, if anyone out there who is a patron or a board member or a donor, you can make these changes too. A lot of the excuses we get from organizations is, well, our patrons and donors just want to hear Hummel. They want to hear Telemann. If you push for these changes, they will respond. If you say something to these people, they will start to change the way they program their music. They will start to look for these composers. They will start to ask the questions. They will look to hire on and bring on people like, me with Hamilton Hine Society, the programming consultant, a role that was created for me to help unwhitewash and unstraightwash what we know as our canon, what we use in performances. We just need to do the work and do it now and not wait for someone else to start.
And if I could go back even further, I promised myself I wasn't going to get political, but we as a society, our arts organizations should look like the communities that they serve. So in order for that to happen, the communities need to feel welcomed. And so then in order for that to happen, our children need to be educated earlier so that by the time they get to Dr. Toppin and to Dr. Powell, it's not such a huge culture shock, which means then we have to get people in office who advocate for music education. And then the music educators that Dr. Toppin and Dr. Powell are turning out from their universities who have this knowledge can then teach our kids, who will then grow up thinking and knowing that this isn't foreign, that this isn't elitist, that Margaret Bonds isn't some sort of ghost, that she is relevant and beautiful and deserving of her place, and that she is normalized, although she is special. So we've got to go back further and get our kids and save our kids and educate our kids. And the only way that we're going to do that now in this society is to get people in office that are in line with understanding that your arts help breed healthy society, help breed beautiful society. Because what does society do when we're in trouble, when we're in turmoil? We turn to the arts. When somebody gets married, we turn to the arts because we need music at the wedding. We need music at the funeral. We need music to uplift those that have been afflicted by natural disaster and trauma. Music heals, but in order for it to heal all of the souls, it has to get into the souls when they're very, very young in our schools, in our public schools, where it's free education. And music education should be free education for our children. It shouldn't be an elective. It shouldn't be a choice whether you take, football or one of the sciences, but you can't take choir and you can't take band and you can't take orchestra. It shouldn't be a choice. It should just be. And so we've got to go back further and save our kids so that the time that they go through these musical situations and get into these universities, it's not a culture shock. And then now you've got a community. Now you've got an audience. Now you've got a beautiful board of directors that gets it because they've grown up with it, that they understand it, they appreciate it. We've got to get there.
Wonderful. Dr. Powell, would you like to contribute?
Actually, they've said pretty much everything I would want to say. Just kudos.
Wonderful. I cannot thank you all enough for being with us tonight. If anyone has any final comments, I'm more than happy to give you the platform. Everyone's staying quiet.
Support, support, support. We need to support. When you see these initiatives happening, support. When you see these smaller organizations producing beautiful art that's celebrating these composers, support. When you see a beautiful singer that has programmed this amazing music, whether you know their names or not, whether they are the names that the industry decides that they are valid enough or not, go support them anyway. And to my fellow artists out there, program the music of African-American composers, of women composers, of living composers, of deceased composers, of the entire African diaspora. Be brave enough to program it because audiences will come to see us. And it is our duty to not only entertain them, but to educate them. And they will then go to the next recital. And if they hear a set by Florence Price, they won't be shocked and stunned and turned off because they've heard it from you. They've heard it from you. So be brave and put these people on your printed programs. Tell your agents, tell your pianists, tell all of these producing organizations, I'm doing a recital and it will feature these composers as well. Speak up. Use your voice, not just for entertainment, but for education and advocacy of these brilliant musicians.
And I would like to, can I add one thing to that?
Please.
That Kenneth made me think of. You know, there are courageous people who want to express our music. And I get emails often from these people inquiring because someone in the audience said, well, you know, you're appropriating. You should not be singing this. This is by a Black composer. This is a spiritual. And people write me, whether it's choral directors or whether it's solo singers, and they're asking me, can you write and tell my principal, because I'm teaching this to my students, and the principal got a call from a parent, or a parent came and complained, and it's normal. Oftentimes it's a white parent who's saying, you should not be singing this Black music because we're all white at this school. And so I always encourage people by asking them, why are you singing the spiritual, or why are you singing this music by this African American composer? And generally, if they can't tell me why, I said, that's the problem. Because if someone comes to you and says, you shouldn't be singing that, if you can tell them why you're singing because of the message, it'll shut them down. Well, you shouldn't sing that spiritual. I'm singing this spiritual about healing. There is a balm in Gilead, because these students in my choir need healing. They come from places where sometimes they don't get healing at home. I want them to know when they come to this choir, it's going to be a place of healing for them. And I'm singing this song because of that very message. So I think a lot of times when people sing our music, they will be trying to be courageous and sing it. But if you do not know the message or understand the message, when you get questioned about it, you're in trouble because you have no answer. Have an answer about the power and the beauty and the message, and you will normally be able to shut down the people who make it only about race.
Before we start the altar call, I want to
just go. Powell is ready. We're at the pass the plate point.
I just want to say one more thing, is that there are 5 names here that should be leading Google searches from this point forward. There are 5 names here that should be getting follows on social media, and then look at who they're talking about and follow them too. This is the one way to really start learning about all these composers and all these musicians and who we are and what's being talked about. You'll be surprised when you follow this rabbit hole that there is so much more, even beyond the 5 of us, that will completely change the way you see the world and completely change the way you engage with music as a person, how you share music and understand how everything that we talk about and what we do works. Just start searching and doing the research now, immediately.
Absolutely. One of the most recent comments in the chat says, I'm so inspired. And I have to echo that. I'm so inspired by everything that you all have shared tonight. And I can't thank you enough for being here. I'm happy to get to know those of you who I didn't know before. And I cannot wait to Google all of you and go down those rabbit holes. So thanks to everyone who's joined us tonight. And also, this will be up on YouTube and Facebook, so please feel free to share it with other colleagues and students or friends. I think that this has been a wealth of information, and I'm just so grateful to all of you. So with that, we will end the broadcast, but thank you again, and have a good night, everyone. Oops.